Pretty nice. Let's keep it going. And this is the term, well, when we want to validate the information that we are receiving. We want to make sure that this is a real email, not exactly the email that belongs to someone real, but at least that it has the corresponding format, which is not something like this or without an ad or something like that. Just because maybe the user mistakenly input the wrong email, and additionally, because, well, there is some people that will try to take advantage of this. So we need to make the validation, and additionally to make sure to, well, validate the information that we receive here as well. So what we are going to do is to, well, validate into our backend the information that we are already receiving, and then we are going to show that specific errors to the user. So let's go there. We are going to validate our information. We are going to close this and remain this completely empty. And going back to our contact controller, we are just going to, before actually sending the email, validate the information. And we can do that through the request. So we have request, validate, and validate is going to receive an array with the corresponding rules. So we are going to use the email in the validation and essentially the same for the message. So in both cases, we are going to have both specific scenarios completely required. We need the email and we need the message. But then correspondingly, we are going, in fact, to put this into an array. Let's put it here to have different rows. And there we are going to say that this needs to be an email, and we are going to say filter. This is going to be sure that this is a corresponding email with the regular format that we use, not something with just an ad or something like that. We are going to use filter to make this even better. And then we are going to make sure that, for example, this is a maximum width of 255. Let's put this in the quotes. And we are going to do essentially the same here. We are going to have a minimum of, let's say, 10. And once again, a maximum of 255. That's all. So, of course, with this maximum, we are not overwhelming the capacity of our database, basically the restriction that by default is applied to the strings that we have. And essentially, we are specifying that minimum, we need this, and that's all. Of course, we need to separate here the elements, and we are performing the validation. So if those rules are not accomplished, this is going to throw an exception. We are going to handle that specific messages if we need, and of course, the email is going to be sent. We are going to fail here because the validation rules are not completed. So if we go back here and try to send this is going to fail because of the email. If we get in touch, you can see, of course, we need to send something, let's say valid, but once again, this is going to fail. So let's get in touch. Nothing happens. Similarly as the previous class, but if we go to our Laravel log, there is nothing happened. It means the validation rules triggered the exception and this doesn't get executed at all. That's perfectly functional, but well, what happened here? The user needs to know what's going wrong, what's happening, how to resolve that issue. So we need to go now to our welcome page and show the actual error. So for that, we can use a component that already comes with Laravel Jetstream. So we check here in Jetstream inside our JS folder in the resources, there is an input error component. Here it is, which essentially is a paragraph with the red color saying something that we specify here as a message. Basically, let's say this slot. So if we go there, we can use this specific component after we import it in our welcome.view page. So let's go back here and we are going to import the get input error. And this is going to be input error as well. So that means that we can use the get input error in the set of components here. And that's all. That means that we are free to use it right now. So after the email, we are going to put that corresponding message. So we are going to have get input error. Let's to make sure this is correct. And essentially, we can keep this simple, in fact, to use the short way to close this, saying that the message is going to come from the actual error. So we can use the form, and yeah, magically, the form is going to provide us the form, the data that we already have. Remember, that specific element that we have here in the data. If this fails, it's going to automatically populate for us an errors property when we can access to the corresponding attribute, the email or the message or anything else that we have there. So if we go back to that specific location, we can get access to errors and then go to email. And essentially we can do the same for the message. So here is, instead of email, we have message. Of course, if there is not any error, these companies are not going to be shown. This is not going to appear, but of course, if we fail, so we are going to get it here. So let's try this again. Let's to refresh, of course, to get the latest changes into account. Let's to chat again. Test add something. And let's say only 3 characters here. Get in touch, and there it is. The email must be a valid email address. Perfect, because yes, it is not valid. Let's say that we have the .com at least the format is gonna be correct. And here, well, we need at least 10 characters so we can send them randomly. Of course, this is not exactly the best way to validate this. You probably would like to additionally research and see to who to use a honeypot, or essentially how to validate the actual email using a third-party service or something like that. But we are just practicing, we are just keeping focused in the important things here. But of course, you are free to then start adding and asking anything that you need. So if we try to this again, the validation rules are going to be okay, and that means that we can essentially receive the email with that specific information. Here it is, and here it is. Now let's add a small detail to show that the user that we are actually sending the information to our backend, and it's essentially that once the user clicks on get in touch, we are going to show a loading bar, or basically a loading icon here that is going to provide the feedback to the user that there is something happening actually. So let's go back to our form, essentially in our welcome.view page, and in the get in touch, we are going to replace this depending on the status of our current form. Essentially, once again, the form of Inertia has a lot of possibilities. You can see we can initialize it with an object, we can get access to the errors, and essentially we can know if it is form processing, if we are actually sending that information to our backend. And how can we use that? Well, we're going to say that the disabled property of this button is going to be attached to this specific element if the form is being processed. So we can use form processing, and then if it is true, we are going to attach the disabled property to this button. So this is going to appear in a different color, let's say. Additionally, we are going to change the contents here. So let's add a span here. And this span is going to contain inside an icon, which is basically a semicircle, and we are going to spin this out. So we are going to create a semicircle, which is essentially an HTML entity. So we use the ampersand, the sharp, and we are going to say 96, 96, and finish with a semicolon. Then we are going to add the stylus here, which is animate, and we are going to use spin. We are going to rotate that specific element. We are going to add a margin rate of 1, and we are going to say that this is going to be visible using vShow only depending on the value of form processing. If we are processing our actual form, we are going to show that specific circle, form processing here. Now, if it is not the case, essentially we are going to preserve all of this. So we are going to say another span. Inside we are going to get the get in touch, and this is going to be visible once again, vShow equals to this, but of course in the opposite. So if not form processing, of course we are going to have some styles here as well, if you prefer, but remember, we are just getting the styles generated from our specific button. So if we go back here and refresh, let's try this again. Let's chat. Of course, we can use a different button if you prefer, just to verify. So we can use test, add something else, something here. And of course, let's get in touch. And you can see how it easily appeared and showed the loading information. Of course, if we use something preferably with a better format, accomplishing the routes, there it is. We are showing the loading process. Of course, it is going to take a long time. So this is going to be there until the process is finished. And we already know once again that we are receiving that specific email in the bottom, as you can see here, with the corresponding detail. That's all. At this point, we are validating the form, and we are actually sending that to our corresponding and configure email address. And now this is the moment to, well, eventually close this specific modal, or even better, showing a congratulations or a thank you message to the user, because, well, they actually get in touch with you. So let's see how to do that in the following class.